Hello guys, this is Slicer, and this is quite awkward because I have just been talking to these guys in the chat for 15 minutes. But today's podcast, because this is a podcast of course, is gonna be about urban legends. They are one of my favorite things to listen to and to tell as well, because they're really like I don't know how to describe it. You know, they're one of those things that are too, like one of those hidden gems, you know, those things that aren't meant to be heard, you know. I love it. I love it. Yeah, so we're gonna have a little interactive podcast as well, because you can always call in the podcast, or viewers can always call in the podcast. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will not be able to call this podcast again because it will be a pre-record, but here we go. Okay, so I've got a few urban legends ready to go. The first one is called The Hook. I have not read this one, I've never heard this one. I'm just gonna read it off, and we'll have a little sneaky chat about it, I guess. Maybe someone has heard something similar happen to a friend of a friend or something. I don't know, just type in the chat if you heard this story before. Let's go. So this story is called The Hook. A teenage boy drove his date to a dark and deserted lover's lane for a makeout session. He turned on the radio for mood music, leaned over to whisper in the girl's ear, and began to kiss her. A short while later, the music suddenly stopped mid-song. After a moment of silence, an announcer's voice came on, warning in an ominous tone that a convicted murderer had just escaped from the state insane asylum, which happened to be located within half a mile of Lover's Lane, and urging that anyone who noticed the man wearing a stainless steel hook in place of his missing right hand should immediately report his whereabouts to the police. The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. The boy, feeling bold, locked all the doors instead, and assuring his date they would be safe, attempted to kiss her again. She became frantic and pushed him away, insisting that they'll leave. Relenting, the boy peevishly jerked the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. When they arrived at the girl's house, she got out of the car and, reaching to close the door, began to scream uncontrollably. The boy ran to her side to see what was wrong, and there, dangling from the door handle, was a bloody hook. I love those stories. I really like them, because the really scary part about this one is it could actually be true. That's actually what I like about these urban legends. They can be true. I watch a lot of the Thinking Atheist, and he has an amazing voice for these kind of stories, by the way. He normally talks about atheist stuff and all that jazz, but around Halloween he does like some ghost stories, he calls it. Urban legends, things revolving ghosts. It's really cool. It's one of my favorite podcasts, is one of those. And it's time to look at the chat. Where the bleep is the interaction with this chat? This is silly. The title lied to me. sorry, very sorry. I'm in your backseat. Holy shit. Okay, nice. The chat is random as usual. Now let's see. Humans Can Lick Too. The next one is called, and again, I never heard this one, but I hope you didn't either. So this one is called Humans Can Lick Too. And if you know an amazing, or less amazing but still cool urban legend, you can always type it in the chat or link me or call me, whatever, and I will definitely read it out. So here it goes. This one is called Humans Can Lick Too. A young girl named Lisa was often left alone at home because her parents worked late at night. So they've brought her home to protect her and keep her company. One night Lisa was awakened by a constant dripping sound. She got up and went to the kitchen to turn off the tap properly. As she was getting back into the bed, she stuck her hand under the bed. I would never do that. Sorry that I interrupted you there. I would never do that. Just like stick my hand under something that no, especially when it's dark. My hands will remain in my pockets or whatever. But she stuck her hand under the bed, and the dog licked it reassuringly. The dripping sound continued, so she went to the bathroom and turned off the tap properly in there too. She went back to her bedroom and again stuck her hand under the bed. And again the dog licked it. But the dripping continued, so she went outside and turned off the taps out there. She came back to bed, stuck her hand under it, and the dog licked it again. Still the dripping continued. Drip, drip, drip. This time she listened and located the source of the dripping. It was coming from her cupboard. She opened the cupboard door and... or cupboard. Lol, I'm Belgian. She opened the cupboard door, and there, her dog hanging upside down with his neck cut, and written on the window on the inside of the cupboard door was, "Humans can lick too." Pretty nasty, but very true, as my girlfriend will tell you as well. Probably shouldn't have said that, but hey, it's about urban legends. Am I right? Okay, these are like the pretty common ones, but again, like if we've got a dun 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 from Hazu in the chat. Very nice, very nice. Now, this one's called the Fatal Hairdo. I'm just picking out the things that I haven't heard or have heard a different version of or whatever. So I'm just randomly picking this. Again, I would love some submissions from you guys. Do some creepy pastas, some normal urban legends. I don't know. It's really nice if you could send it to me. In the meanwhile, while you guys are searching or just listening, this one is called, again, the Fatal Hairdo. A very stylish teenage girl grew tired of spending hours carefully wetting and spraying her hair to attain an extreme beehive do. She washed her hair in sugar water, allowing it to harden in the style she wanted. At night, she carefully wrapped a towel around it and slept on a special half pillow, designed not to disturb the hair. One morning, she failed to come down for breakfast. Her mother went to her room only to find her dead on the bed. When the towel was removed from her head, it was discovered that she had been gnawed to death by rats or bugs. I've heard both versions. Now there's 2 examples of this. Actually 3, 4. Oh, there's 4. Okay. Yeah, they're all similar. I don't really. There's much better myths here. I'm just gonna look some up. Urban legends. Let's see. Oh, this. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this creepy pastas. I love this. Now we always like do some campfire nights, you know. We just sit around the campfire with some friends, some guitar, some like, you know, bit spikier drinks, you know, if you know what I'm saying. Whiskey or something, rum, all those nice licorice kind of things. And we also tell these urban legend kind of podcasts, stories. I'm so sorry. But this one, oh my. Let's see, killer in the window. Okay. There's two examples, two examples. This one's called The Killer in the Window. This girl was home, all alone, watching TV on a cold winter night. The television was right beside the sliding glass door, and the blinds were open. Suddenly, she saw a wrinkled old man staring at her through the glass. She screamed, then grabbed the phone next to the couch and pulled a blanket over her head so the guy couldn't see her while she called the police. She was so terrified that she remained under the blanket until the police got there. It had snowed a lot during the day, so the police naturally decided to look for footprints. But there were no footprints at all on the snowy ground outside the sliding door. Puzzled, the police went back inside the house, and that's when they saw wet footprints on the floor leading up to the couch where the girl was still sitting. The policemen looking at each other nervously. "Miss, you're extremely lucky," one of them finally said to her. "Why?" she asked. "Because," he said, "the man wasn't outside at all. He was in here, standing right behind the couch. What you saw in the window was his reflection." Pretty scary shit. Pretty scary shit. I didn't hear that one before, but that one's really nice. Really nice. Let's see. I Am Teddy Chain Letter. Let's see. Oh no. No, this is not a good one. This wasn't even a story. Attack of the Butt Spiders. I'm just gonna pick this one because it sounds funny. Nah. These are not stories at all. Let's see. And I'm sorry, chat, by the way, if I kind of ignore you, but yeah, it's really hard to do a podcast for YouTube and still be entertaining for the chat. So I'm so sorry. Recently it had been the Friday the 13th, so but anyone experienced something weird that day or not? I am Teddy, killer in the back seat, knife in the briefcase. This is a nice. I'm gonna take example 2 of this story now. I always pick the first example, but why not do the second one? This one is called The Knife in the Briefcase. A young woman was leaving a local shopping mall, only to find that she had a flat tire. A well-dressed young man carrying a briefcase came up to her and asked if she needed any help. She told him she would call the AAA. But when she did, she was told it would be over in an hour before a truck would be dispatched to her site. The gentleman urged to her and let him fix her flat, and she finally allowed him to do so. When he was finished, he asked if she would give him a ride to the other side of the mall, as his car was parked there. Looking at her watch, she realized how late it was and apologized to the young man, saying that she needed to get home as it was her daughter's birthday and her husband was at home with the 2 children awaiting her arrival. The man went on his way. When she got home, she told her husband what had happened at the mall. and about the man who came to her aid. The husband went out to look at the tire and saw that the man had inadvertently left his briefcase in the trunk of the vehicle. He brought it into the living room and they opened it to see if they could find the man's name and phone number. Upon opening the briefcase, they found only 5 items: a rag, chloroform, duct tape, a body bag, and an ice pick. Wow. The ice pick was probably used to cause the flat tire. I see Lady Vena has joined us here. We're doing a podcast on urban legends, preferably scary urban legends. And yeah, so this one is going on YouTube, so that's why we are doing this. I haven't been streaming in a while, so I thought that this would be a very fun idea to do it this way. So there we go. Let's see. Japanese legends. I love Japanese legends. I'm really oh, the toilet ghost. Well. Okay. So this one I think is called the toilet ghost, or Hanako-san. Okay, here we go. Hanako-san is a Japanese urban legend about the ghost of a young girl that's supposed to haunt school toilets, opening and closing doors and scaring anyone who enters the bathroom, knocks on her stall and calls her name. Hanako the ghost in the toilet almost achieved the status of a national phenomenon in the Japanese legend 20 years ago, when a weird wave of stories of ghost sightings swept through the nation's schoolyards. Every child had a Hanako story to tell. The stories, of course, are many and varied, but every school child in Japan, at one time or another, had stood in a dread and anticipation as he or she ventured into the school toilet alone. This is similar to the legend of Kashima Raiko, if I pronounced it right. Again, I am definitely Belgian. A female ghost without legs who also lives in school bathrooms. She calls out, "Where are my legs?" when people enter the bathroom. The correct way to answer her varies. In one version, you have to say, "Kashima Raiko, Kamen Mask Shinin," which means that person. Whoa, this is just explanations, I guess. Oh, that was a fail. I was actually looking for some scary stories, not descriptions. Scary stories. There we go. Real stories. These are real stories. Okay. Redman. Let's go for Redman. Ah, this one. Oh, I can't even scroll this one. So this is a long one. I like it, and that's what she said, I guess. Damn it. Here we go. The Redman. The Redman is a frightening urban legend from Japan. I love it. About a family who receive a visit one snowy night from a mysterious man in a red cloak. Okay, here we go. In the winter of 1935, there was a harsh blizzard in a small village in Japan. A cold wind was sweeping through the house. The snow was falling heavily on the roofs, and a family of 5 lay asleep in their beds, unaware that they were about to receive a very strange visitor. Just after midnight, they were awoken from their peaceful slumber by a loud knock on the front door. The father and mother got out of bed and went to answer it, while the children stumbled out of their beds. wondering who could be disturbing them at this time of night. When the father opened the door, he found a stranger standing outside. The man was covered from head to toe in a long red cloak. He was holding up a lantern, and his face was hidden in the shadow of his red hood. "I have been sent by your relatives," says the red man. "Your mother has been struck down by a sudden illness, and her condition is very serious. She wants to see you before she dies." The husband hurried and dressed, and after kissing his wife and children goodbye, he left with the red man. Together they set out on the journey to his mother's house, which lay in the neighboring village. His wife waited anxiously for him to return while the children went back to bed. A couple of hours passed, and there was another loud knock on the door. She answered it and was surprised to see that the man in the red cloak was there again. "Your husband sent me back to fetch you," he said. "His mother's condition is getting worse. It is very likely that she will not last until the morning. He said he needs you by his side when the time comes." Just as her husband had before her, the wife didn't waste any time and quickly got dressed. She took her children to the house of her neighbor, a middle-aged woman, and asked her to take care of them while she was away. With that, she said goodbyes and followed the red man into the night. About an hour or two later, there was a loud knock at the door of the neighbor's house. The red man was waiting outside, and he asked to speak to the children. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your grandmother has passed away," he said. "Your parents have told me to come back and pick you up. They're waiting for you at your grandmother's house." The children were about to leave with the red man when the neighbor grew suspicious and stepped in. She stood in the doorway and refused to let him go. "You can't take the children out on a night like this," she told the red man sternly. "We're in the middle of a blizzard. They'll catch their death of cold. There'll be time enough tomorrow. If their grandmother is dead tonight, she'll still be dead in the morning." The red man kept insisting, but the neighbor was a stubborn woman and refused to budge an inch. The red man wouldn't take no for an answer, but when the neighbor grabbed her broom and threatened to beat him within an inch of his life, he reluctantly gave up and walked off into the snow. The next morning, the countryside was covered in a thick blanket of snow. An old man got up early, and despite the cold weather, he decided to go for a walk. As he was crossing the long wooden bridge that lay at the entrance of the village, he noticed something strange. There were some bright red patches in the snow. Looking closer, he was horrified when he realized that they were bloodstains. Leaning against the railing of the bridge was a bloody axe. The old man grew frightened. The signs were unmistakable. There had been a murder. He hurried to the police station in the center of the village and reported everything he had found. The police searched the area and found the bodies of the missing father and mother floating in the river. They had been brutally slaughtered, and their heads had been chopped off with an axe. After talking to their children and the neighbor, the police were in no doubt as to who was responsible. The mysterious red man was a killer, and it was clear that he has been trying to lure the children to go in with him as well. If the neighbor woman hadn't stepped in when she did, the red man would have murdered the children too. This incident was a major event at the time, and it shook the residents of the little village to their very core. None of them would ever again feel safe in their beds at night. The police never managed to discover the identity of the red man, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Nobody ever got a good look at his face that night, and the strange visitor disappeared into the night as suddenly and as mysteriously as he had arrived. Very, very good story. Very good story. Really love this. Really love these kind of scary. Like it just grabs you with the throat and just takes you on a journey, a scary journey. Love it. With that, I will definitely start the new one. So this is in the category real stories. I'm pretty skeptical, but if this is real, then well. This one is a pretty long one as well. Okay, so this one's called The Girl Next Door, and the intro is: the girl next door is this really scary story about a young girl who is stalked by a man who lives next door. Okay. Ooh, it's actually like told in the perspective of Jessie, which is the girl that was stalked, I guess, but I don't know this story, so let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Jessie, and this is my story. It all began when I was 13 years old. I was a girl next door, just like any other girl in my age. I went to school, did my homework, played sports, and I hung out with my friends. I was happy and carefree, without a worry in the world. I was just your average girl. The house next to me, or ours, was vacant for a few months, and then in the spring a new neighbor moved in. He came over and talked to my mom, and he seemed like a friendly guy. He said his name was Nick. He was in his mid-30s, but he wasn't married and didn't have any kids. He was kind of on the quiet side and didn't say a whole lot, but he was nice. He even offered to do some yard work or handyman stuff for us. Since my dad wasn't around, there were a lot of things about the house that needed fixing up, so Mama took him up on his offer. He helped us out a lot. A couple of times he came to do some chores when I was in the backyard, and he would always try to strike up a conversation with me. I thought it was funny because he was so nervous and sweaty and often seemed to get tongue-tied. Then one morning, just before I left school, my mom took me aside and said, "I don't want you talking to Nick anymore. If you see him outside and I'm not home, I want you to go into the house and lock the doors." When I asked her why, she wouldn't answer. All she would say was, "I got a funny feeling about him." I thought she was just being overprotective, but as always I listened to my mom, so I kept my distance from him. That summer, my friends and I built a fort in the woods behind our house. It was just a ramshackle little hut, and we put it together with some boards and scraps of wood we found laying around. One day I came home from school and discovered that someone had fixed it up and turned it into a proper hut. It had a window and a door and everything. There was even a little mailbox on the front with my name on it. Inside there was a letter. When I opened it, I realized it was from Nick. "Dear Jessie," it read. "Your fort looks so broken down. I thought I'd fix it up for you. Hope you like it. I think it's neat how we live next to each other. Yours truly, Nick." I thought it was so cool that I immediately wrote a thank you note and dropped it in his letterbox. The next day, there was another letter from Nick in the mailbox on my fort. It was really long and full of weird stuff. He said he wanted to be best friends with me forever and couldn't wait until I turned 18 so I could move in with him and we could be together. He also said my mom was nuts and was trying to keep us apart. The strangest part was where he told me he would never harm me and wouldn't let anyone else hurt me either. I had no idea what he meant by that. It took me a while to get through, and I finished reading it just as my mom was coming home from work. She made me show it to her, and when she read it, she said it made her skin crawl. What is a 34-year-old man doing writing a letter like that to a 13-year-old girl? She shouted. She immediately called the police, and when the officers came out of her house and read the letter, they told us Nick has recently been released from prison. The next day he was arrested, and they sent him back to jail. My mom told me he was sentenced to 2 years. Not long after that, my mom started getting letters from Nick. They were all angry and filled with curse words. He kept asking why she had lied about him to the police and said he knew I was in love with him. When my mom showed the letter to the police, they gave him another year in jail. After that, we stopped getting letters from him. As time went by, I gradually forgot all about Nick and went on with my life. Then one day, I came home from school, and when I walked up the driveway, I saw him standing in his front yard, staring straight at me. I got such a shock that I just ran into the house and slammed the front door behind me. My heart was beating fast and I was shaking like a leaf. That was the start of the nightmare. Every day he began watching me compulsively. Whenever I went outside, he would be in his yard, just staring at me with a weird smile upon his face. It was a terrible feeling. Day and night, he never seemed to take his eyes off me. The fear of not knowing what he might do made me sick to my stomach. It was like living in the middle of a scary movie. Then one morning, my mom found a teddy bear sitting on our back doorstep. It had my name on it. The police said there was nothing they could do because we wouldn't prove that it was Nick who left it there. I felt like a prisoner in my own house. I would crawl around the ground from room to room because I didn't want him to catch a glimpse of me through the windows. A few days later, I was driving to school. When I got into the car, I saw Nick sitting in his truck next door, just staring at me. As soon as I drove off, he began following me. I didn't know what he was going to do, and all I knew was that I had to get away. I have never been so terrified in all of my life. He kept right on my tail and I was desperate to escape from him. I floored the accelerator and drove all the way to my grandmother's house. When I got there, he even followed me all the way up to the driveway, but as soon as he saw my grandmother, he took off. I was petrified. My mom reported it to the police and said it was a violation of his probation. They arrested Nick and he was sent back to jail. However, I knew it wasn't over. I was the object of his obsession and he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. I was expecting the worst, but what happened next shocked me beyond belief. My mom got a phone call from the police saying Nick had been released on bail. She immediately called me at the school and broke the news to me. I couldn't believe it. I was scared to death. After all, I was the one who had gotten him sent to prison. Now he was going to be mad and I was afraid he would come after me. My mom and I left our house that day and we never returned. For a while we lived in a hotel until we managed to find another house. While we were waiting for the trial, we stayed on the run. I really thought he was just going to kill me. I was afraid, really terrified. If he could find me, he couldn't kill me. If he couldn't find me, he couldn't kill me. So I stayed in hiding. Eventually the judge gave Nick another 2.5 years in prison for the terrifying ordeal he made me and my mom endure. That's nothing. When he gets out, I'll be 18 and I'm afraid he's going to come after me again. I'm petrified that he's never going to stop. The experience has changed me a lot. I'm not the same happy-go-lucky girl I used to be. I don't trust anyone like I used to. I guess I had to grow up a little faster than anyone else. I was a girl next door. I just happened to live next to a man who turned out to be the devil in disguise. The scariest thing about the story is that it's true. The girl's name is Jerry Cooper, and her stalker is Nick Hamilton. Wow. That was one mouthful, but wow. It was really a pardon. Whoa, I don't know what I got there. But a small part in that story, I really got the shivers. I don't know why. Let's see. Dare to dream. As this say? This is okay. So this one is called Dare to Dream. It has an intro, which is also nice. Dare to Dream is a story submitted by a user named Gidgy. It's about a girl who has bad dreams after her brother was killed in a car accident. Okay. She woke up gasping for air. She could still feel his tight fingers around her neck. She quickly switched the light on and pulled the dark out of her room. She had been having the dream for a month now. It was the same each night. She would fall asleep, then she would open them. This was the start of her dream. First, she would hear a quiet shuffling or sound. She would roll over and the door would be cracked open. She knew she had closed it. Suddenly her brother would appear in front of her. His head bloody like it was when they found him dead in the street. It had been a hit and run. She was 6 years old. His name was Jake. In the dream he would say, "Jessica, come with me." She always said, "No." He would insist, but she wouldn't say yes. Jake would say, "Then I'll make you." He would lock his small hands around her neck. He was strong for his age. She would look into his eyes, pleading. But his eyes weren't the beautiful deep blue anymore. They were a hot, glowing red. As her vision began to blur from lack of oxygen, he would laugh demonically. Next thing she knew, her eyes would flutter open, and she would sputter and gasp, trying to catch her breath. Then she would turn the light on, so the dark shadows where he could be lurking disappeared. Ever since the dream began, she had become paranoid. Always she checked behind her to make sure no one was there. She would also keep the light on most of the day. In her room she only had a mirror and a bed. She thought the less furniture she had, there would be less places for Jake to lurk. The only reason she had a mirror was because she loved them. Her house used to be full of mirrors. She wasn't sure why she only allowed herself one mirror now. Every morning after the dream she would look into the mirror. She knew that she would see. She knew what she would see, but she looked anyway. Sure enough, she had the distinctive purple bruises around her throat, just like always. She looked at her watch. It was 8:42. She put on a t-shirt and jeans and went into the yard. She sat on the bench and watched the clouds. She began to feel tired and decided to take a nap. She opened her eyes and knew she was in the dream. She had never had the dream during the day before, let alone outside. Jake came out from behind a large maple tree. He was smiling devilishly. It occurred to her that she had never asked him why he was there. "Jake, leave me alone." Why are you here?" she screamed at him. He walked closer. "You don't know?" he said, sitting next to her. "Don't you know why you only have one mirror?" He asked. She said no. "Do you know why they stuck you in a mental ward instead of a federal prison?" he said. She suddenly remembered. She had an obsession with mirrors. She loved them. She was driving home from the store, admiring her rear view mirror. She felt a bump on the road. She continued home and saw the police waiting in her driveway. They told her she had run over her brother. She loved him so much she had a mental breakdown, screaming gibberish and trying to force the policeman to shoot her. They had to sedate her so she wouldn't injure herself or others. She pushed the memory to the back of her mind, quickly forgetting it. She realized Jake had been inching closer. He clamped his hands around her throat. She gasped and choked for air. She remembered it, and it was just a dream, and she would wake up soon. She started losing consciousness. This was when she usually awakened, but this time she didn't. Wow. Nice. I like that little turn where she killed her own brother, and the vengeance is upon her. I want to have a really immersive kind of storytelling story, obviously. I'm not sure what I would do. Let's see, losing face. Yeah, losing face. Okay. So I'm not gonna read the intros now because I think everyone just wants to dive in it just like I do. Let me clear my nose. There we go. So this one's called Losing Face. Ever since I was born, my twin brother Tommy was my best friend. We didn't have an easy life. Our sister committed suicide years ago, and our older brother had a severe condition called xeroderma pigmentosum, which means he's allergic to sunlight. When he was 10 years old, Tommy got a bad case of alopecia and lost all his hair. All the other kids at school made fun of him, but he didn't care. That was the best thing about Tommy. He always found a reason to smile. Then one day, when we were about 14, something awful happened. We were in our woodwork class making kids' toys. Tommy went over to wait for the sander. He had just started sanding his own block of wood when someone suddenly pushed him from behind. He lost his balance and fell forward into the sander, which was still turned on. There was a grinding sound and a horrific, agonizing scream. Everyone looked around. A lot of them covered their eyes, not wanting to see the gruesome scene. Who could blame them? My brother's face had been practically torn off. There was a lot of blood. An ambulance came and was rushed to the hospital. Tommy survived, but his face was never the same. He had no nose and no lips. His eyelids were gone too. Our mother couldn't even bear to look at him. Our father made him wear a paper bag over his head. And when he was in the house, the bullying got much worse after that. The kids in school were much more cruel and heartless. They pointed at him, laughed at him, and called him horrible names. It was relentless. But through it all, my brother Tommy kept on smiling. However, I knew his smile was just a mask. Deep inside, I knew he was crying bitter tears. Almost a year had gone by when the attacks began. It was front page news and the town was gripped by fear. A teenage boy had been mutilated as he lay in his bed. His injuries were so severe that he was put into intensive care. I stared at the photos that were published in the newspaper. The before photos showed him smiling for the camera in his school uniform. The after photo made me feel sick. His nose had been cut off. One of his eyes had been gouged out. His lips sliced off. And a ghoulish grin has been carved in his face. I recognized him from before photo. It was the boy who had pushed my brother into the sander. Have you seen this? I asked, pointed to the story in the paper. Tommy just nodded. Yeah, he said with a shrug. It's a tragedy. A couple of days later, the newspapers were reporting that it had happened again. Someone else had been found mutilated in their bed. This time it was a girl from our school. The skin had been peeled off her entire face. She looked like a big hunk of raw meat with her eyes. It kept happening again and again. Every few days some kid we knew would be attacked in their sleep and mutilated beyond recognition. Some had their eyes gouged out. Some had a smile carved into their cheeks. Some had their noses cut off, and others had cruel words carved into their foreheads. The police said that the only connection they could find between the victims was they were children of the same school. If they had asked me, I could have pointed out one more connection. They were all kids who had bullied my brother. My mother was frightened by what she had read in the newspapers. She told us there was a maniac on the loose and begged us to be careful. Tommy just looked at her with a mischievous look in his eye and said, "Don't worry about it, we'll be safe." His tone of voice was way too matter-of-fact, as if he knew something we didn't know. That same night I was laying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when I heard the door creak open. I climbed out of bed and crept quietly out into the hallway. At the bottom of the stairs stood Tommy. He was still in his pajamas, but in his right hand he was clutching a blood-stained knife. "Where have you been?" I asked. When he heard my voice, he looked up at me in shock. Then his deformed face twisted into a wide grin. "Nowhere," he replied. "I've just been out for a walk." I didn't believe him for a second. I knew exactly what he'd been doing, had been out doing. I ran into my parents' room, yelling at them to get up. "Tommy's been sneaking out at night," I screamed. "He's got a knife, it's covered in blood." My father pushed past me and ran down the stairs. He snatched a bloody knife out of Tommy's hand and threw it across the room. Tommy went nuts and my dad had to wrestle him to the ground. He was trailing and shrieking like something that came beyond the grave. My mother quickly phoned the police and they came to take Tommy into custody. The police collected all the evidence. They had a solid case against Tommy. But while he was in jail, he confessed it all to a psychiatrist anyway. My parents were devastated. They couldn't understand how their own son could do such horrible things. It turned out that Tommy went insane from all the emotion and mental torment those kids had put him through. He broke into their houses at night and destroyed their faces. I did it so their lives would be ruined, so like they ruined my life. He said when we visited him in the mental hospital. "But how did you stop them screaming?" I asked. Knockout drugs," he replied with a smile. "A few drops and they won't wake up for anything." Tommy will never get out of the insane asylum. He's going to be there for the rest of his life. And I, for one, am kind of glad about that. These days I find it very hard to sleep every time I hear a door creaking. At night, a chill runs down my spine, and just for a moment, I wonder if Tommy has come home. Wow. Very, very cool. I see that we have the only Commander Peepers. I welcome. I don't think you have been in our past streams, but oh my, what am I doing? Okay, so this one is sent in by our lovely Mitch. It's called Room Zero. Let's see if this is a good one. Thanks for the submission. That was the first submission anyway. There we go. This one's called Room Zero, by the way. It's been a while since I've written anything related to the Disney Corporation, and I'm sure you can understand why. A lot has been going on since my last post, and oh, well, it's kind of awesome. Hang on. Where? Okay, I'm just trying to find the start. Definitely want to thank you. That's something I have to face. Oh, that's not me being unprofessional at all. Hey Vipers, by the way. We're doing a podcast on scary, preferably scary, creepypastas or like urban legends. So yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna read the whole thing. Okay. Again, thanks, Mitch. It's been a while since I've written anything related to the Disney Corporation, and I'm sure you can understand why. A lot has been going on since my last post. I've received a lot of questions and concerns about from folks who read my first-hand account, Mowgli's Palace, a resort that was built and abandoned by Disney. I want to thank everyone who mirrored my post. Okay. It's been taken down from a few places, mostly corporate sites that were easily leaned on by a larger power. However, for every nuked topic or disappearing blog post, it seems like 100 more have popped up. This is something they'll have to face. There's no turning back for them, not for me either. I'm definitely being followed. For the first month or two, I chalked it up to paranoia. Any casual glance or half smile in my direction sent me off, hair standing on the back of my neck and everything. The first one, or rather, the first one I was actually able to spot was a telephone worker milling around my apartment complex. He was middle-aged, doughy, dressed, and just as you'd expect, but something just seemed off about him. I couldn't place it, but I knew this wasn't just my imagination acting up. He was awkward and out of place, not somebody who was comfortable doing his routine job. I followed him around the corner, only to lose him there. When I turned back to go home, there he was, staring directly at me, about 10 feet behind me, expressionless and cold. Tell me what blue-collar phone jockey does that? I guess that's the worst part. Never feeling safe, never feeling alone, and that and the occasional Disney merchandise left somewhere for me to find. Little rubber Mickeys in the mailbox, some Disney Adventures magazine on my bookshelf. They had little Mickeys everywhere. 3 circles, one big, 2 small, in a silhouette of the famous mouth's head. I've started keeping a running list of Mickeys I found. Coffee cup rings on my coffee table, 1 big, 2 small, colored glass bottles left on the doorstep, viewed from the top down, all red. Graffiti on the wall. On my wall to work, a huge earth, a small sun and moon in the proper locations. They're everywhere. People have emailed me about this as well. If you repost anything, I have to say, you're going to start finding those sons of bitch outlines, I guarantee it. The best one by far, one that actually made me laugh because of the horror of it all. was a drawing in chalk next to my car. I was taken aback at first, walking through the parking garage, keeping an eye out for people following me. The outline seemed a perfect match for, well, murder victim. You're probably familiar with it if you've read my past posts. Written in yellow paint, I'm sure, was a single word: retract. The only good thing that has come out of this is that I know I'm not the only one who's seen something they shouldn't have. I'm not going to give their names because, well, if I have to tell you why, you haven't been paying attention. Researcher goes to Disney parks whenever he can. All throughout the year, he's not going to have fun, enjoy the rides, etc. He's looking for the gascots. There's been a long tradition, apparently, of people reporting strange patterns throughout the park. Silence, motionless, staring patterns of every age, shape and size, men and women, adults, children and teens, all wearing Disney-themed gas masks. Way back when Disney would get tons of complaints about oddly dressed folks following others around the park, folks who would then merge into crowds and disappear. Later on, the gas masks caused folks to draw their other conclusions, and reports of possible terrorists and bombers started flowing. All of those reports most likely went straight to the trash can. I know I can't find any sign of any such occasion reported by the media, although you should be aware of the fact Disney can pretty much control its press like no other. Researcher goes to the parks, talks to a few people, and tries to draw any attention to himself. He'll just ask 3 or 4 families if they have seen his friend who's wearing a funny mask. He has yet to see a gasket for himself, though on one occasion a child pointed him towards Frontier Town. As he raced through the crowd, he heard a single voice ahead cry out, "Mommy, I want Goofy air mask too." A fellow I call Lifeguard worked in the Disney water park from 2001 through 2003. He stood up top a huge water slide and made sure none of the kids got too rowdy. He passed the kids through one at a time, telling them over and over again to be safe, keeping their arms in and so on. One day, as he tells it, this fat kid goes down the tube and doesn't come out the other end. He sent 2 or 3 kids after. The whole thing moves at a steady clip, so naturally you'd expect that the fatty got stuck, the kids that followed him were stuck too. Not so. Only the big kid disappears. Everyone else comes out the other end, cheering and splashing like nothing's wrong. Lifeguard shuts down the slide, much to the aggravation of the kids waiting. Before he can go through of any of Disney's strict procedures, splash! Fatty finally comes out. Staff members pulled the kid out of the water. He sank like a stone when he hit. His skin already blue and his eyes wide. All he would say was, "No face, kids," and stop squeezing. The kid was okay, in case you're wondering. He got carted off right to the medical center. When Lifeguard was told to open the slide back up, he made a big stink about how it clearly wasn't safe. Despite his complaints, he was threatened with firing and begrudgingly opening the slides again. From that point on, he kept closer eye on the kids. Every so often they come out in the wrong order, never as stunning as the fat kid, but always with a vague look of concern, a dreamy half stupor that seemed as if they were trying to figure out what was reality. They take on some water and choke a bit, and they'd never come back up to ride again. I read emails with the same sort of unease you might be feeling right now. I wanted him to share his own story, but in the end he didn't want to expose himself that way. I can't say I blame him. Snow White, which wasn't the actual role she played, was a character at the park. She had a little tidbit for me. You know what happens when a costumed employee drops dead in his suit? Like, 1 second he's taking a picture with little Jimmy, and the next he had a fatal stroke. A second costume mascot in the area has to sit in with the corpse on a curb or a bench and wait for a designated dry cleaner to arrive and cart the body away from a discreet manner. In a discreet manner, sorry. All the while, patrons have no idea they're sitting with a dead body for photo ops. Feel free to check your photo albums at this point. That was bad, but another fellow janitor went completely off the creepy charts. Disney World, and probably others, is built with a series of underground tunnels just below your feet. 3 stories worth. Anything and everything you can imagine is down there for use of the employees. They're called utility corridors. Basically, that's the reason you don't see characters out of place or janitors wandering through the park. They pop in and out of hidden doors and travel a concealed town you're walking on. Janitor told me something that might be common knowledge, but was nonetheless news to me. Walt Disney had several apartments built into his parks. There's one above Cinderella's castle, there's one in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. They're all over the place. More than that, there are nightclubs, a movie theater, a bowling alley, and much more, all behind doors built right into the whimsical facades you pass by without a second look. Club 22 is one such hidden area. If you have the cash to join the exclusive club, you don't, then I like how he says we don't, because I don't have money. Then you'll have access to it and much more. Club 22 is a place where anything goes. Disney Company calls these places dark zones, spots where the squeaky clean visage of Mickey Mouse gives way to drinking, drugs, and yes, sex. Controversy, the rest of the park is the bright zone with a few grey zone utilidors between. As far as janitor has said, it wasn't always that way. It was more of a slow decline and a gradual relaxation of social norms within that elite group. The reason he knows all of this, you may have already guessed. He cleaned it. After a lengthy background check and a non-disclosure form, janitor moved up from a park attendant to one of the dark zone's cleaning crew. Now, before you get some satanic human sacrifice vision in your head, janitor saw nothing of the sort. Lots of empty alcohol bottles, yeah. Used condoms scattered like deflated New Year's balloons, oh yeah. He cleaned up his share of blood, piss and vomit, but it was all down to the unrestricted behavior of the patrons as opposed to any sort of cult behavior. At least that's how he sees it in retrospect. All that trash, that profane shit, went into a furnace and mingled with the smoke of a quaint cottage chimney. If you've been to Disney World, you've breathed ultra-condensed sin. Backing up from this information was Hammer. Hammer mailed me the old-fashioned way, though I don't know how he got my home address. He sent me photocopies of work papers proving his employment, with this instruction to burn them when I was convinced, which I gladly did. Hammer worked around Disney World Park, doing demolition and construction. At one point, he approached his superior regarding some strange constructing plans. There was white rectangular area marked off on the blueprints about the size of a supermarket. The area was left unnamed and only bore the words "Do not dig." Not only was he his superior in the dark, but he was super fucking purposely in the dark. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to know about it, and ended the conversation with this space intentionally left blank. Hammer didn't get it. The area seemed a waste of space, and it was directly conflicting with the work his team had been given. He started poking around the area on his off time, finding only a derelict steel door and a great span of concrete just beyond. It was a supermarket's worth of blank grey floor. Soon after, Hammer started picking gaskets out of the crowds. Unlike all other reports, the people, the things, would stand in full view of the guy. They cluster together in the distance, or they'd just be pressed against the wall when he turned a corner. He said they moved weird, like they were weak or injured, like a deer that has been run down by a hunter and can't flee anymore. The gas masks, the Disney character faces with filters jammed in, he noticed that they seemed wet on the inside, like condensation on a car window. Tiny beads of water glimmering behind the glass, making it impossible for any of them to actually see. Probing further, Hammer started asking questions of anyone and everyone who had been working in the park for a decade or more. He hid that end throughout until he was directed to Ida, an elderly woman who worked in a restaurant on Main Street. She'd been there since way back, and though nobody had the balls to ask directly, everyone knew she had plenty of terrible stories to tell. Hammer asked about the empty space, then about the gas masked customers, and at first he thought he would receive the same non-answer as he'd gotten so far. She was quiet, eerily quiet. "Room 0, she croaked. A single, shaking hand placed to her cheek, as if she were a little girl fearing a father's punishment. She didn't meet the man's gaze for an entire conversation. Room 0, as it turned out, was yet another hidden room, just like the apartments and Club 22. However, its sheer size and its spot deep beneath the park set it apart from any other of the fun dark zones. It was a bomb shelter. Room 0 was built to withstand a massive attack, to be it conducted by foreign or domestic enemies. Room 0 was to be stocked with enough rations to feed the entire park's average number of patrons at any given moment, and house a smaller yet lavish panic room of sorts for Disney's higher-ups. During World War II, official Disney gas masks were actually produced for children to wear in the event of attack. The idea was that it would be less scary for kids if Mickey's face was emblazoned in the wartime safety device. Yes, I know the obvious problems with that. During the Cold War scare of the 60s, when Disney World was constructed, Room 0 was stocked with similar masks as well. Whether they cared about the fears of children or just callous branding, the things found their way down there. What's more, some genius decided that kids would then be frightened by the gas masks their parents wore. And so all masks, adult and child, were made to comply to this insane standard. Ida described it as treating a wound with lemon juice. None of this explained what Hammer had been seeing, though. Not only the seemingly supernatural appearances, but the emptied out room as well. "I've been in there," he explained. There's nothing but a cement floor and 4 walls. No. Ida shook her head and covered her mouth, stifling a sob. You've been on top of it. Someone or something sounded the alarm one day when the park was at full capacity. The warning was clear. It was supposedly an air attack. Security ushered everyone down into the... Get down! I don't know why it was Arnold Schwarzenegger there, but sorry. Security ushered everyone down into the tremendous shelter. There they were ordered to put on their masks and hunker down for the duration of the assault. Everything was quiet for about 30 minutes, save for the crying children and the frightened whispers. No one wanted to die, and so they were thankful in a way for this strange measure of safety. Then the first scream rang out. "Hey!" a man shouted. "Quit pinching!" Waves of shrieks and yelps ripped through the crowd from one wall to the other, back and forth. "Who's running around? Settle down!" someone hollered. "Who's laughing? This isn't funny!" "Ow, who stepped on my foot?" Despite security guards urging to calm down and keep their cool, the crowd became more and more agitated until finally, after nearly an hour of madness, the lights flickered, then died. What followed could only be described as utter chaos. In the dark, only the wails of the young and the anguished cries of a doll could be heard in a massive swelling din that bloodied the ears of all within that black echo chamber. A group of staff members and a select few patrons made it out of the door, ready to face the war above rather than the insanity below. What they found, of course, was a desolate yet untouched theme park. The music continued to play, echoing through silent storybook towns. Upon returning to room 0, the few stood at the top of the steel staircase that led down into the pitch blackness, heard no sign of the previous fray. There was only silence. Ida herself descended that staircase despite the begging of those she left above. She reached the reinforced doors, herself now awash in the darkness, and heard only the buzzing in her ears. A single voice came out of the darkness. The echo made it impossible to tell whether the mocking, raspy voice was at the back of the bomb shelter or if it was right in front of her face. "Shut the door, dear. You're letting out the cold." Gripped by terror, she did just that. Within days, the entire thing, shelter, staircase, all of it was covered with feet upon feet of cement. Air systems and generators above the ceiling were removed, creating a large empty space. "They're all still down there," Ida told Hammer. "Down there with whoever that was." You might notice that I've used Ida's name. Unfortunately, she passed away soon after telling the story. Accidental fall, supposedly after getting out of bed and to turn off a light. Such a company devotee. The paper reported that her entire bedroom was covered with Mickey silhouettes. Wow. That was... it was a very interesting one, that's for sure. It was a long one, but it was definitely worth it. I went through the entire 1 hour and 12 minutes telling that story. It was really cool. It was really cool. But what would a urban legends podcast be without a good ghost story? This one's called The Grey Lady. Um, if it loads. Okay. So this one is a short one, especially compared to the last one, but nonetheless it will be very, very interesting, I guess. And thanks again, Mitch, for the previous one. This one's called The Grey Lady. The Grey Lady is a ghost that haunts Willard Library in Evansville, Indiana. Excuse me. The first sighting of the Grey Lady ghost in Willard Library happened in 1937. At 3 a.m., the night janitor at the children's library entered the basement to check the furnace. He was so startled by whatever he saw that he dropped his flashlight. It was a ghostly figure of an old lady, clothed in a long grey dress, a grey shawl, grey shoes, and a grey hat and a veil. As he watched, the figure dissolved into the shadows. The night janitor was so freaked out that soon afterwards he quit his job. The library hired another janitor to replace him. When the new janitor went into the basement at night, he too began catching glimpses of the ghost. It wasn't long before he quit his job as well. Ever since then, a ghost has been spotted a number of times. Many people who visited the library also report sudden cold spots, unexplained noises, faucets turning on and off on their own, doors opening and closing by themselves, and the overpowering smell of perfume. Others have noticed books and furniture being moved around and have felt an invisible touch on their hair or earrings. A 3-year-old boy was wandering around the library. Suddenly he came running back to his mother. He was very upset and his eyes were widened with fright. When she asked him what was wrong, he told her he had seen a scary lady dressed all in grey. Several sightings were reported by employees who saw the Grey Lady lurking around the bookshelves. One of the librarians was going by some book stacks when she stopped suddenly. The Grey Lady was standing right in front of her. The librarian looked away for a second, and when she looked back, the ghost had vanished. Another librarian went home one night and was surprised to see the ghost standing in her living room, waiting for her. Who is the Grey Lady and why does she haunt the library? Some believe that it is the ghost of a woman named Sarah Carpenter. Her father, Willard Carpenter, was a founder of the library, and when she died he left all his money to the library. His daughter Sarah was left out of the will and never received any inheritance. They say that she held a grudge against the library property before the library was built. Story of the Grey Lady. There you go. There is a ghost cam that was installed in Willard's library in 1999, and viewers on the internet can watch it in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the Grey Lady ghost. Is there any one that would like to check that, or even believes in these kind of stories? Because I don't really do it. Hang on. So we got another submission from our lovely Mitch. It's about Disney. So I'll just start reading it. And let me just post the link. I do not know. There is no. I'm so sorry. There is no link to the actual. Oh, I can't even copy paste this one. That's just too bad. Okay, but it's I'll just type it. It's Willard. It's WILLLARD, and then library. Library. There we go. Okay, log in. Thank you. Very nice of you to sign me out. Oh my, this is no. Okay. Actually, since I'm failing, I'm actually gonna leave it at that. This was a very beautiful podcast. I think we'll keep that other story for next time. And there we go. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. We didn't really get that many viewers, but I hope this will definitely get a few views on YouTube. Well, I love doing these kind of stories, so next podcast will probably be the same thing. I'll try to arrange a host, and a host that I used to do podcasts and commentaries and stuff with him a lot. His name is Josh Artson. He is a very well-spoken Englishman, and yeah, you'll love his voice. He has a radio voice, which I totally envy, and he has a really good personality as well. So yeah, be sure to look out for that, and I'll see you later. Thanks for joining, and I will see you